stand pat. They drafted playmaker, who I think is the best wide receiver in this draft. They haven't had a great wide receiver since Odell Beckham. Well, they have one now. Malik Nabers pick A+.
Brian Burns to the New York Giants, the Carolina Panthers, a little bit more than a year from when they wouldn't trade him for 2 first-round picks, have now traded him to the Giants. The Giants pairing Brian Burns with Kayvon Thibodeaux for the chance to have guys creating havoc on both sides of the line.
You know, you guys, I'm just going to go ahead and jump straight into the New York Giants at this point, because this team, man, really has put together a great offseason so far, not only through free agency, but also through this recent draft. They were able to add key pieces and key positions on both the offensive side of the ball that made them better and on the defensive side of the ball that made them better. And I think that's ultimately going to make this team a lot better overall. And man, if everything that I think they've done so far turns out to do what I think it's going to, this team, if they don't start getting noticed, is going to be one of the biggest sleeper contenders in the NFL this year. But before we get into why I believe that, if you like New York Giants content just like this, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any Giants videos for the remainder of this offseason. Okay, so to get back on topic with the New York Giants, this team, of course, is coming off a super disappointing season where they did not get better from the previous season, which led to them obviously not making the playoffs. They ended up being one of the worst teams in the entire NFL, which led to them getting the 6th overall pick in this year's draft class, and led to them needing to make some big-time changes if they wanted to turn this franchise around. The first and biggest thing they did, in my opinion, to contribute to this change was going out with that 6th overall pick and drafting that guy Malik Nabers out of LSU, a first receiver off the board. The only reason he wasn't the first receiver off the board was due to there being another generational talent in Marvin Harrison, but I think Malik Nabers is a generational talent in his own right, and I do think that this guy is going to turn this Giants offense around by himself. He's extremely explosive and fast, so he's going to be able to get down the field in a hurry. With him, you have a guy that I do like a lot as long as he stays healthy in Wan'Dale Robinson. I think Wan'Dale is a great receiver 2 option, especially in the slot with what he brings to the table, and if this guy stays healthy, I think him and Malik Nabers are going to be a great 1-2 punch. Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy that is extremely versatile in what you can do with him. You can motion him all over the field and use him in a ton of different route concepts, and that helps out an offensive ton. And when you pair that with the fact that you still have Jalyn Hyatt, who's only going to get better going into his 2nd year, which gives you another really good deep threat, and that you have Darius Slayton, Allen Robinson, and Isaiah Hodgins, this weapon group at receiver really doesn't look that bad. Obviously, it's not the greatest weapon group ever, but adding Malik Nabers to it helps so much more than people realize, and it's going to allow these other guys to get open a lot easier because they're not going to be the main focus of the defense. Not to mention, you're still going to have Daniel Bellinger, who's a guy I like a decent amount. You went out and you drafted a guy in Theo Johnson who has crazy upside with the athleticism he brings. I think we're going to see Brian Daboll do a lot of interesting stuff with the offense this year to help mix it up, and whether Daniel Jones or Drew Lock is the starter, I think we're going to see them have a decent amount of success due to what is around them now. I really do like the addition of Devin Singletary in the backfield because I think he had a really underrated season last year, and if he can bring that same production to the Giants, this rushing attack will also be pretty solid, which makes everything round out pretty well. The Giants also made additions to the offensive line, and if the young guys on this unit find a way to get better too, I expect them to be a pretty solid unit. I know there's still question marks with guys like Evan Neal, but if that guy can just get a little bit better and he can turn out to be a solid player at the minimum, I really don't see why this offense couldn't be pretty hard to play against. But even though I'm pretty confident in what this offense brings to the table, I think the main factor for success on this team is going to be the defense due to what they added this offseason, because man oh man are they starting to look scary. The biggest addition to this defense, of course, is going out and trading for that guy Brian Burns, who has proven at this point to be one of the best edge rushers in all of football. The fact that this guy is just 26 years old and he still managed to put up the numbers that he has shows me just how good of a player he is, and I think he's only going to play better on this Giants defensive line. The reason I say this is because he hasn't had much help on the Panthers, and when you look at this Giants roster, the best unit on this team is definitely the defensive line, so he's not going to get double teamed too often, which is going to allow him to win a lot of one-on-one blocks. And if you're leaving Brian Burns one-on-one a lot, you can expect him to get a lot of sacks, and I think that's exactly what we're going to see happen. The reason I say he's going to be one-on-one a lot is because you have Kayvon Thibodeaux on the other edge, and you have Dexter Lawrence on the interior that you could probably argue is the best interior defensive lineman in all of football. Kayvon and Dexter Lawrence are coming off absolutely insane seasons where they put up pretty ridiculous numbers, and considering both of them are pretty young, I only expect them to put up the same production, if not even even better. And if that's the case, this defensive line is going to be one of the best teams in football at getting after the passer and one of the best units in football at stopping the run. Now, when you move back a little bit to the linebacker room on this team, I'm also pretty confident here, especially when they're paired with this defensive line, because I think they're going to be pretty dominant as well. Bobby Okereke is the main linebacker here, of course, and I think this was a great addition last year, even though a lot of people didn't talk about it, because he played great despite all the bad play around him, and I only expect that to stay the same. He is a great guy that you want leading your linebacker room, and when you pair with that you also have a guy that I like a lot in Micah McFadden, I think you have a really strong duo here that's going to make the front seven overall really, really good. They're going to be a stout unit that you don't really want to play against, and when you have a front seven that's good, everything else behind them on the defense is going to follow suit, and it's going to make their jobs a lot easier. When it comes to the secondary, you of course had to make moves here as well coming into this offseason because you didn't play very well there last year, and I think the Giants have done that, starting off by going out in the second round of this draft and taking that guy Tyler Nubin to kind of replace Xavier McKinney. Xavier McKinney is obviously a really good player, but the Giants didn't want to pay him the big contract that he wanted, so instead of paying him, they went out and got a guy that I think is going to replace him pretty well in Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota. I know he's going to be a rookie, and it's going to take a little bit of time for him to adjust, but this is a guy that has film that is first-round caliber in my opinion, and I think he has an extremely, extremely high floor, and I think he's going to fit in perfectly with what the Giants want to do. And then to add even more to the secondary, you also went out in the third round and took that guy Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky, which I think was an absolute steal. This is a guy that can play inside or outside wherever you want him at, and I think we're going to see him come in and make an immediate impact to pair with what you already had. You of course already had Deonte Banks, who I think showed a lot of flashes in his first year, and he's only going to continue to show more flashes as he gets older. You still have Cordell Flott, who's a young guy that you took just 2 years ago. You still have Nick McCloud, who's another guy I think is pretty solid, and you have a freak athlete in Trey Hawkins, who you took last year, who I still think has a chance to be something in this league, and that makes me extremely confident in what this corner room could potentially be. Now, as far as the safety room goes, you already added Tyler Nubin, like I mentioned, but you're also still going to have Jason Pinnock, and you went out and you signed Jalen Mills, which I think is another guy that's going to come in and have a huge impact. And when you pair a defensive line and a front seven that is going to be able to stop the run and get after the passer at a consistent rate, with a secondary that has a ton of potential, I really do think you're going to see a lot of success. And when you pair that with an offense that I think is going to be a top half offense in the league with all things considered, this team, like I said at the beginning of the video, is going to be a sleeper contender if people don't start taking notice.